Hey everyone, it's Eric Huey, host of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast, where we prepare millennials to be leaders of the future. Now, if you're familiar with the podcast, you know that it's usually interview-based, and we tell the success stories of high-performing millennials. Each time, I tend to ask a couple of the same questions. Not all the same questions, because that would be a boring podcast, but there are a key 1 to 2 questions that I ask every guest on the show. And one of those is, what books or resources have made a positive impact in your life or in your business? Books are such incredible resources because they take years upon years of people's successes and failures and condense them into a few hours of reading. The mission of the book breakdown is to take those few hours of reading and then further condense them into 15 minutes or less of listening. This is the GenWhy Leaders Podcast Book Breakdown.
Hello, GenWhy Leaders. My name is Cory Bittner. Professionally, I am the co-founder and COO at Falcon Wealth Advisors in Kansas City. You can find my previous appearance on the GenWhy Leaders Podcast on episode 11, Don't Be Forced to Play Small. The book I'm going to review today is called A New Earth, and it's by Eckhart Tolle. I hope that you're buckled up and strapped in because we're going to get deep with this one. Eric's probably never going to be happier that he only allows 15 minutes for these reviews. I'm reviewing this book because, quite frankly, it changed my life, and I have seen it change the lives of others. I know that we often speak with hyperbole and describe something as quote-unquote life-changing, but we don't really mean it. I mean it when I say this book changed my perspective and subsequently my life. This book, along with Tolle's other work, responds to what he describes as the urgent need of our times, which is the transformation of consciousness and the arising of a more enlightened humanity. Pretty deep stuff, right? Can I tackle it in 15 minutes? I'm going to do my best. Really, to summarize the book here, I'm going to discuss some of the primary points that it emphasizes. To begin, A New Earth does outline a destructive place that we all call home, but also shows us how we can save it together by detaching ourselves from our egos and practicing acceptance of what is. Now, this is not an apocalyptic book. It highlights what Tolle describes as the human condition and how we can all transform together. A big premise of the book is how the ego, or the belief that we are what happens to us, is a major cause of pain and suffering for a lot of people. For me personally, several chapters describing the core of the ego and the many faces of the ego, in other words, the different roles that we play, simply clicked. I'm going to read a passage from the chapter called The Core of Ego. Do you want peace or drama? You want peace. There is no one who does not want peace. Yet there is something else in you that wants the drama. It wants the conflict. You may not be able to feel it at this moment. You may have to wait for a situation or even a thought that triggers a reaction in you. Someone accusing you of this or that, not acknowledging you, encroaching on your territory, questioning the way you do things, an argument about money. Whatever it might be, can you then feel the enormous surge of force moving through you, the fear, perhaps being masked by anger or hostility? Can you hear your own voice becoming harsh or shrill, or louder and a few octaves lower? Can you just be aware of your mind racing to defend its position, justify, attack, or blame? In other words, can you awaken at that moment of unconsciousness? Can you feel that there is something in you that is at war, something that feels threatened and wants to survive at all costs, that needs the drama in order to assert its identity as the victorious character within that theatrical production? Can you feel there is something in you that would rather be right than to be at peace? Tolle also talks about how the past and the future cause us pain and anxiety while we're sacrificing the present moment. I think the world that we live in today, the concept of staying present is something we've all heard. Don't worry about the future. Don't worry about the past. Be here now. While it makes a lot of sense, it can still be a challenge for a lot of people. But he talks a lot in this book about ways to think about that. How life being a series of present moments and how ultimately you should make friends with the present moment. In other words, you embrace what is. You let go of what you believe should be. He talks about a key tenet of Stoicism, which maybe some of you have studied before, which is that there is no good and bad events, but only what we make of them. As of this recording, the country and the globe, for that matter, is in the midst of a global pandemic, COVID-19, that's caused a lot of pain and suffering for a lot of people, for their families, for their loved ones. I think that a lot of people's reality has been shook, and people are thinking about the role that they play, what it is that they're doing, the role the government plays in our lives, and everything else involved. There's no doubt that we are living in unprecedented times, and I think that this particular book is more important than ever during that, thinking about what it is that we can actually control. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but our thoughts about it. That is a key tenet of Stoicism. Everything that happens is what is. Our mind ultimately decides whether it's good or bad. Tolle talks about how you can decide the relationship you want to have with the present moment. Do you want the present moment to be your friend or your enemy? The present moment is inseparable from life. So you are deciding what relationship you want to have with life. Once you've decided you want the present moment to be your friend, you make the first move. You become friendly toward it. You welcome it in, no matter what disguise it comes in, and soon you see the results. Life becomes friendly toward you. People become helpful. Circumstances cooperate. One decision can change your entire reality, but that one decision is something that you have to make over and over again and again and again until it becomes a natural way to live. The decision to make the present moment into your friend is the end of the ego. The ego can never be in alignment with the present moment. Another key takeaway from the book is that we identify with our ego, our material possessions, the roles we play in society, and all that causes suffering and unhappiness. Tolle talks about how people identify themselves with their ego and with material possessions. Ultimately, he argues that transcending both is what all great religions and philosophy have been about, from Buddhism to Christianity. Awareness is the knowledge that your thinking self is not you, that your thoughts, your opinions, and your background are not you. You are a part of the universe, and the current manifestations of your thoughts, positions, opinions, victories, and possessions do not define who you are. When you can transcend the ego, you become so much more powerful. In other words, this book is one that's about power, in my opinion, and how sometimes letting go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. All right, I've talked about a lot here today, and I know that a lot of this is pretty heavy or pretty deep stuff. And quite frankly, I think that this book, while I'm doing the best that I can to describe it, is one that people have to contemplate a little bit more themselves. I can't describe to someone who they are. I can't describe to someone how they should live their lives. Ultimately, that's not up to me. It's up to them. So again, for me, one of the aha moments, or one of the big takeaways from this, is thinking about what it is that we can do on a day-to-day basis. What action can we take from this very high-level philosophical concept of our ego controlling who we are, but ultimately learning and understanding that we are not our ego. We are not the things that we own. So what would I encourage listeners of the GenWhy Leaders Podcast to do? What's something that you can take away from this? One would be to think about who you are. If you note what I said early in this recording, when I described who I am, I mentioned what it is that I do professionally. But again, that is what I do professionally. My job, my career, that is not who I am. Remember, you're not your job. You're not the roles that you play, the possessions that you own, or the things that you can do. You can lose what you have, but you cannot lose who you are. Secondly, contemplate how much we want to be in control and how we frankly expect that everything must go well and everything must go right. Tolle says that one of the reasons we're unhappy is that we expect success and we expect that things will go well. Frankly, this is a deep, entrenched entitlement mindset, and it predisposes us to anger and unhappiness. Eric talks quite a bit on this show about how millennials are described as entitled. Right? We've all heard that before. I'm firmly in the millennial camp. I am 30 years old, and that puts me right in the middle of that generation. But I think, frankly, this entitlement mindset goes beyond just our generation. We can't help it. It's not our fault. It's not our parents' fault. It's not someone else's fault. It's what we have been predisposed to, frankly, our whole lives. And I think that this probably plagues, frankly, every generation, not just ours. But if we can let go of the belief that things must work out the way that we want them to, that gives us power. That's what allows us to be friends with the present moment. That's what allows us to work with what is and not the way that we wish things would be. At the end of the day, one of the most important things that we can do is to focus on controlling the controllable and not worry about everything else. Well, I thank you all for taking the time to listen today. I hope you've taken something away from my philosophical attempt here at describing what is a pretty deep book, but it is one that's probably different than a lot of the other books that have been described on the podcast. I didn't want to go over another business book. While there's a number of great books that I've read, this is one that frankly for me was very transformational, and it was one that helped me realize who I am, what I want to do, how to live my life on a day-to-day basis, and the things that I can focus and control. And I hope that everyone else can hopefully pull something away from this breakdown to where they can do the exact same. So again, thank you for your time. I want to say goodbye to everyone, of course. If you have questions or if you just want to connect with me, frankly, you can feel free to do so. I'm active on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram to some extent, and also LinkedIn. So you can certainly find me there. Twitter is probably where I'm most active, and my Twitter handle is @Cory Bittner KC. You can always feel free to email me also if you'd like. My email address is Cory, C-O-R-Y, @FalconWealthAdvisors.com. Thanks again for your time. Have a great day.